Venerable sisters and brothers, Dhamma friends, today is also, now it is time for the talk. May everyone settle down and give the consent with 3 times, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Iti imesu chatu ajjattika bairesu ayatanesu anattanu passi viharati ayang vucchati bhikkhave anatta sanyati. Dear venerable sisters and brothers, Dhamma friends, yesterday we introduced the subject of anatta sanya, or the perception of non-self, and we took time to make use the concept of perception to understand this non-self characteristic. Of course, not it is directly related with the perception of perception, even the materiality, the feelings, perceptions, or volitional activities, directed dispositions, or consciousness, each and every one witnessing towards this non-self character, if you have the correct perspective. So different people reach it from different gateways. It depends on individual's character traits, personality. So therefore first the Buddha give the blast or the blow towards a permanent notion or permanent perception, and introduce impermanent perception toward the materiality, feelings, perceptions, volition and the consciousness. And then introduce the non-self characteristics or perception towards the non-self, and for that he enumerate the eye and the visual objects, the ear and the sound waves, the nose and the smell, the tongue and the taste, body and the tactile sensations, and the mind and the Dhamma. So each and every one, in each and every transaction, each and every sensuous impingement is an example for someone to get into this non-self characteristic. So therefore, when someone is practicing mindfulness and try to see the true nature of the materiality, more and more you become immediate with the very object that you selected as primary object. You are bound to see the impermanent nature, and more you observe this impermanent nature or notion, your permanent notion or perception toward the this is permanent, this is auspicious, this is pleasurable, and this is having some pith kind of will be disproved. It is a gradual process. So when it is happening and where it is happening and proportion, how it happens, it is always gradually it is happening. So materially you have to have certain amount of mindfulness and certain amount of experience at least towards your primary object in sitting meditation, towards your primary object in the walking meditation, and have certain amount of familiarity with the day-to-day activities. Then onward this permanent notion will be replaced by the impermanent notion, and while you are continuing, a hell of a contradiction, hell of a ambiguity sets into your life. Each and every decision, each and every sight, each and every hearing, everything will be questioned slowly. And then it is going to the feelings also, because you are let all the feelings to come in without filtering, without discrimination, and try to be with it as much as possible from the beginning through the middle to the end. And whenever you are perceiving something, apprehending something, you never try to arrive at a decision. Instead, you increase the number of observations or observatory capacity rather than inferential knowledge. So therefore, so much of fresh information bound to come in. And more you are observing more and deciding less. That means evenly suspended attention in when you are observing and suspended decision. You never arrive at a decision on anything. You are accumulating more and more information, and it's a kind of mystics going to take place. Less and less information and quick and rush decisions make you more and more agitated, more and more committed, and volitionally you get involved. More and more you get information instead and suspend your decision, that is, we can say equanimity or maturity, then you find your commitment to the each and every individual transaction reduces, or there's opportunities to reduce, and you can observe the phenomena from the bird's eye view rather at a distance, and things are happening, less and less decision making, but more and more vigilance. So therefore this impermanent notion and the non-self characteristics, they are going hand in hand when the mindfulness becomes steadfast. And you can compare it with the other people. Those who are not meditating, they are rushing to a decision with least amount of observation, least amount of information at hand. So their decisions are not enduring, not lasting. Ultimately they get disappointed and they become vulnerable and they become answerable for their decisions. Instead you find more and more observation and less decisions. Your commitment reduces, not only in in-breath and out-breath, not only in walking meditation, not only in your day-to-day activities, even in your social life also. More and more observations going to give a huge amount of protection, and then the balance will be easier. That is, we can say, in the preliminary level, you are reducing the amount of transactions, and increase the mindfulness. Each and every transaction should happen under the light of mindfulness. So that we call slow motion. When you are doing something, whenever you are doing mindfully, slowly, silently, that means less and less activities or less and less impingements coming and avenuing, and everything happening under the light of mindfulness. And when this is increasing, exactly the same thing represent more and more information and less decisions, and then life becomes like a aesthetic thing. Things are unfolding in the natural way. So that Pandita Sayadaw, he says, when you are eating, if you are eating slowly and macerating thoroughly, digestion is easier. Instead, due to one or the other reason, if you are going to take the morsel after morsel without much chewing, without much macerating, your digestion of the starch only happening at the mouth never takes place. It is happening in the base situation, and immediately you swallow it, it goes to the acidic basis, stops, and then onward, the balance of the digestive tract have nowhere to digest it. So therefore, more macerating, more chewing, get more and more salivation, digestion easier, you can stop the diabetes at the mouth level. Exactly the way you are accumulating as much as possible information, things as they are, without coloration, and suspend the decision, then only you can understand the function of this directed disposition or volitional activities or manipulations or fabrications or willful action. For that, how much patience, how much slow action you must have, you have to decide. And therefore, more and more you apply mindfulness, more and more chances you get to see how without your, beyond your agenda, how you get involved in this some kind of activities. Ultimately, you get committed into that, and whenever these things go uncontrollable, you suffer a lot in terms of frustration, in terms of disappointments. And where's the mechanism for you to not to get involved in that kind of thing? Of course, it is in totality, accept its non-self character. But how it is happening in a systematic way or rational way, mechanical way, we can apply with the background information. Whenever you see, whenever you hear, whenever you smell, taste, touch, and in a mental, your pet ideas and projects are working, how it is working. So when and where your eye is to be confronted with a visual object or avenued with visual object, you have to be a seer. For you have to be a seer, you must have a good operative carnal eye intact. And there should have an external visual object. And when they are confronting each other, avenuing each other, the mind must give the consent for the seeing. So whenever these three come together, we call it is the eye contact. That means the eye sensitivity, specifically eye sensitivity, is being impinged by a visual object or light ray, light wave, and then your attention must go totally to the seeing, and then only you all of a sudden become a seer, in order to show in a dramatic way how the non-self character working under such circumstances is. Whenever you become a seer, you automatically become a dumb person, automatically become a person you can't smell anything, you can't taste anything, you can't touch anything, you can't think about anything, because you already avenued and absorbed into this seeing. So there onward, if the object you have seen is desirable, you will taken for a ride, and you never notice by selecting this seeing operation, you lost hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and the thinking capacity. So the volitional activity now selected seeing, because it is more gainful, more desirable, and by selecting one you reject five. The lost you undergo by losing hearing, smelling, tasting, touching and thinking, never you can catch. But you don't know. Your ignorance is so much about the seeing thing. Your desire, your craziness, craving to the seeing thing is so much so, it overwhelms and overcome all the other actions. So therefore, whenever you see, you justify it, that seeing is much better than hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and that is called opportunity cost. By taking the opportunity to see, you sacrifice all the kind of things. So whatever the decision you take, now with 1/5, 1/6, and all you are talking about that object that you have seen, never through the hearing, never through the smelling, tasting, touching and thinking, only by seeing, but you consider you have seen the totality, and then you claim, at that time I see, I hear, I taste, I smell and everything. Now I am talking with my eyewitness. How can you disprove? But the Buddha says, by selecting one, you reject 5. So if you are mindful, you understand how much you have taken for a ride by this visual object. So whenever you to be a seer, you have to understand the seeing object must overwhelm all the other, and desire decides wish to see, or instead of seeing you can be a hearer, or a person smelling, tasting, touching, whatever it may be, decided without your consent. You have no chance. It has been taken by the strength of the object and your preconceived idea, I am happy with that seeing object than listening, smelling, tasting, touching and kind of thing. But you have not given the opportunity to see everything because you have been so absorbed, so bewildered by what you have seen. Unless otherwise you go prepared, unless otherwise you go mindful, you can understand by selecting one, you are rejecting 5. So there you can understand it is not your agenda, you have nowhere, this is the way it is been recorded, so you are just following the suit. One thing. The second thing is, soon you see contact happen, visual object, sensitive to the eye, and your attention is there, you become a seer, that means contact, and then the sensation, feeling, desire, undesirable. So when that happens, immediately you recognize it, this is something auspicious, this is something bad, this is gainful, this is a lost, and according to the perception, the mental proliferation start to take at a rate. You are no more contacting the visual object, you are making stories, fabrication on the imaginary thing that you have seen. So then onward you are completely making stories on, you are thinking about what you have seen. You have cut off from the seeing. Now we are in the mental game, that is called mental proliferation. And the Buddha says, up to the point of feelings, your stream of consciousness is pure like Buddha. Soon you recognize it, the infiltration of defilements happen, and it is catching the momentum, taken you for a ride. Now you are on your own fabrication, your own story, and you are making mansion in the sky. This is how the more attractive things absorb yourself, and then onward the amount of defilements you are accumulating, amount of mishap going to happen, amount of misperception going to happen, no measurement. So this is also yet another point you can understand. You are taken for a ride, you have no more control, and ultimately once the game finished, you fool try to justify what happens. As if you have done it, but easily you can say it is something happening to you, unless otherwise you are thoroughly mindful, you will claim that I did it, it was under my control, like that is the misperception. But if you are thoroughly mindful, I will cite an example, and then you can see things are happening. If you are mindfully, if you are unmindful, you ultimately justify like a blindfold person. Instead, Buddha not only giving the explanation, ask your eyewitness with the mindfulness to see whether it is something happening or whether it is something you do. Take an example, you are on a walking meditation. So in the middle of the walking path, your main object is to observe, to discriminately observe, to in a delimited manner to observe how the impact of the left sole on the ground. And you may see you are starting with the heel, you feel the hardness, or sometimes cool and hot, whatever may be, and then the pressure moving forward towards the toes, and ultimately from the toes it is released by the time other leg is going to take the weight. And when it is happening, you can note it, the sensitivity of your skin or the body, whenever it is contact with the soil or the earth, the contact happens, you are in a, your mind is working in the single channel, you may be fairly successful. Now when you go to the end, your trend will be broken. You have to turn now. So that means your posture, the walking posture, going to go take a posture junction. You are not a walker, now you are going a person turning. When it is turning, if you are sharp enough in the meditation, if you are sharp enough in the mindfulness, you may find not only the complication regarding simple walking to the turning, I immediately going to take a chance and have a look around what are the visual objects available. And the ear going to take a chance to and hear what are the things happening at that moment, and the smell and taste have very little contribution, and some thinking. So, if you are not mindful, you will complain, my mind is very weak, my mindfulness is very weak, so I start thinking, I started to see things, I started to hear things, and it is something to be regret, something to be frustrated. But more and more you practice, more and more you go prepared, you will see the I never ask your consent, it dominates everything, and take the consciousness into the I become the I consciousness. So that means definitely you have to sacrifice the body consciousness. Your sensitivity of the soul immediately change into the sensitivity of the I. The walking person, turning person immediately become a seer, and then the seen thing, the object you are observing, you observe in detail, it's a shape, it's a color, it's a manners and everything. More and more you go into the observing things, more and more you have to sacrifice your bodily contact, and halfway you may come to know, now this is not my primary object. I am supposed to be with the touch of the leg, but what happens now? Now I am observing this and that, and on the halfway, if you are conscious, if you become self-conscious, you can come back, if you go prepared, to again to the leg, again to the contact, provided you are not regretting about changing of the channel from the leg to the eye. If you are regretting, chances to come back is becoming more and more weaker. So therefore, very carefully, Venerable Sariputta is indicating, now your track was in the leg and it has been taken over by eye consciousness, and therefore you are the loser. So your natural tendency is to regret. Natural tendency is the tension, but that tension comes, you think I did it. You think it is my soul. You think it is happened with my consent. You think it is in my agenda. You can verily observe it was not in your agenda, it was not your liking, it is something happened, but due to lack of observation, you attribute, I did it. But more and more observation will reveal, it is something happened to you, it's a mishap. So that mishap never make any defilement if you recognize it as it is. But you are misperceived, definitely you are accumulating demerits. That is the gain, the Buddha says, unobserved, discontinued mindfulness, always think story with the base of self-nature. I did it, I am the mistake, my morality is good, bad, my mindfulness is bad, my concentration is bad, because your continuity is not there, your preparedness is not there. So if you are going with non-self characteristic, if you are going with the impermanent nature, you understand from the leg or body consciousness, jump into the eye consciousness. So it is something happened. The recovery, coming back to the body consciousness, is completely dependent upon whether you are regretting or not. If you are regretting, your mindfulness becomes weaker. Therefore, Venerable Sariputta says, Pamade na kampatiti satibala. If you are so thorough in the knowledge, if you are so prepared in the event, you know from the when you are reaching to the end, you are vulnerable. So that is your preparedness. And it has happened number of times in the early also. Now you go prepared and you never attribute, I did it, but I am a neutral observer. So you know mindfulness, diligence will become a negligence all of a sudden. The sensitivity of the leg change into the sensitivity of the eye, consciousness on the body change to the eye consciousness. And if you are not regretting, there is a fair chance you to be self-aware, self-conscious, and bring back the attention to the leg again. But why it is become so delayed? Because of your regret, because of your bad attribution, wrong attribution, thinking it is something you did, but it is something happened. So whenever you are to observe it in the correct perspective, you see the decision is taken by the ignorance and the craziness or craving, the nature. Because the walking path, the sensation of the leg becomes so bored. It becomes so monotonous. It becomes so boring. So therefore, our consciousness is searching something juicy, searching something desirable. So that magnetizing power of the visual object is not in your agenda. It is not yourself. It is not your volition. It is not your desire. But that is what program in your mind. So when a free chance given, mind select whatever it may be more defiled thing. That is the general statement of the Buddha. Whenever we give a free chance, number of options, mind jump into the object which is giving highest amount of defilements, highest amount of incompassionate, and cut off your well-being and pull you into the desire. So knowing that, specifically when you are walking, reaching the end, you have to be double dose prepared. Now I am vulnerable. When I am turning, there are a lot of chances for the eye consciousness to take the upper hand, ear consciousness to take the upper hand, any other thing happens, so it is not my mistake. It is nothing related to your morality. This is something prepared, this is something pre-programmed, it is my prime duty. See, this is what you call who am I. This is what I am. Instead of regretting, many people think that regret is the moral responsibility. Bullshit. Foolish. This is not your moral responsibility. You must be radically reflecting. The morality is concerned only for the willful action. This is something happening, so therefore, how much you must be prepared, how much you must have to have past mistakes, how much you must learn your mind not to regret, but to observe it again and again. Even if you are successful, next time when you go to the corner, exactly the same thing happens. Again you are vulnerable. That is not a mistake. That's for the reinforcement of what you have already understood. So it has to happen 1,001 times. When you again and again you go, you find whenever something goes wrong, our easy way is attributing that to the ego and calculating everything for the egotistic calculation. But if you are mindful, you may see they are happening due to the cause and effect relationship, due to your karmic forces. due to your likings and disliking. Due to your the directed dispositions or volitional activities, they are not under your control. So therefore, observe it as a neutral observer, observe it in the choicelessness, and you can understand it is everything pre-programmed, and you in a bankruptcy kind of interpretation, you attribute telling my mindfulness is weak, my concentration is weak, my morality is weak, that is why mind is jumping from one object to the other. Of course, in the early part it may be, but when and where mindfulness is steadfast, when and where you prepared, you can understand how it is changing so quickly without giving any kind of a prior notice. And therefore, when and where the posture junctions are happening, you must have double surveillance. Vigilance. To cite an example, most of the car accident happen at the junction, not in the main road. Whenever you are going to get an exit or come in, that is the place more vulnerability is there. So therefore you are being imposed with traffic signs and traffic codes. If you are to exit, you have to signal other people, other drivers and other vehicle, slow down, take precaution. Exactly the thing the Buddha says, whenever you are in the just walking directly, less and less chances for you to wander off. But when you go there and turning, that is we call posture junction. At that time, you are more vulnerable. Therefore, you have to be very mindful, surveillance, vigilance, and you will understand under such circumstances, your craziness, or not the craving nature, the desire, the ignorance going to take the upper hand. And when and where you see it, you may definitely understand, so far I was promoting it because I like to see desirable objects, because I like to hear desirable sounds, smells, taste, bodily contact, tactile sensations, and pet ideas. So therefore you have trained your mind along the pleasure principle. So therefore it has been accustomed. It is working with this momentum, acceleration, no brakes, nothing listening. So you have to slow down it with this vigilance and diligence. Whenever the posture junctions happen, you have to be very careful. Otherwise, your mind is always find a reason to be regret. That is the cancer in untrained mind. Not only that, once you regret, you apply it to the please all the people surrounded, not only to the people, to the climate, to the trees, to the everything, with the notion of self. But if you have to see through it, you can see within yourself also it is happened due to the cause and effect relationship. All the external factors also take part according to the cause and effect relationship. You are the only person can understand it if you are enriched with the teaching of the Buddha. If you are prepared with the already prepared mindfulness and your preparedness for that. So when it is happening, one day you will understand at a given time, out of these 6 doors, one thing is dominating so that all the others will be suppressed. Your whole knowledge coming from 1/6 of your capacity, and your whole life you are trying to prove it. No, I see it, I hear it, I smell it, and all the kind of things. So therefore, the Buddha says that particular person is innocent. He think, it is a complete experience, but if you thin slice the time and apply your whole the qualities to simple thing, you will understand it is accumulating here and there. Ultimately, you fabricate a story. It's ever a story, never the truth. Never the truth. So therefore, you have to observe who am I in each and every posture junction. And ultimately you will find when and where you see how the mechanism it is working, easily you can apply to the other person. That is how they are thinking. That's the way they are interpreting. So therefore we have nothing to fight and nothing to disprove the other person, but you have to simply introduce mindfulness to the other person, and one day he or she will understand by themselves. There's no other way. No fighting, no argumenting, because we are arguing with the blind people. We are arguing with the deaf. The people have no hearing capacity. We are crazy. And we are adding more and more turmoil. Therefore, calm down and observe yourself, then you can understand the value of the non-self characteristic, and therefore unto the contact level or feeling level you are pure, you are Buddha. Moment you recognize, everything becomes filthy, everything becomes a defilement, and then onward you proliferate with the, not with the proper object, but with the perception that you have given, and story goes only with the perception, nothing with the reality. Soon you go into the perception, proliferation takes place, and you start to manipulate, fabricate, adjust everything in a dream world. So therefore, when and where the perception going to be hard and fast, you become very adamant. Ever you will be arguing with the other person, if you are to argue, there you should be a person with confirmed or consolidated perception. That is called permanent notion. That what I see is true. So he is ever ready or she is ever ready to argue, but the Buddha never find fault with that even such a person, because that is the only way he or she can develop his mentality. But still, that particular person also can meditate and one day understand how the perception is working, how the volitional activities are working, how the consciousness is working. So therefore, more and more you go there, you understand things are happening according to the cause and effect relationship. If the situation is not well observed, if the situation is not well covered, you attribute egotistic idea, you attribute permanent notion, auspices, pleasure and self. So therefore each and every transaction, each and every action is a doorway to Nibbana or liberation, if you know how to make use of it. Otherwise, each and every thought moment you are accumulating demerits. Each and every thought moment you are accumulating defilements. So therefore, at least to bring it back to the neutral position, it's a great achievement. Something like when you are observing the breath in sitting meditation, your mind is just be face to face with the in-breath and out-breath, no desire, no hate, neutral feelings are there. It is a kind of a pivotal place, so you have to train again and again, and then suppose a thought happens, so immediate reaction is to hate the thought. Or sound happens, immediate reaction is to hate the sound. Or pain occurred, immediate reaction is to react it. So therefore, if you wish to observe the phenomena, how things are happening and the cause and effect relationship happen, you must understand how is the in-breath and out-breath with sound and without a sound. How is the in-breath and out-breath with the pain and without the pain. How the in-breath and out-breath with the thought and without the thought. And if you still keep the theme of the in-breath and out-breath, you may understand each and every mishap, not necessarily a defilement, but it's a doorway opening for you to see the mechanism, how it is working. And when you go there, when you catch the point, get the gist of the teaching of the Buddha, you find sitting position is not the only position you are meditating. Even in the walking, exactly the openings are there. Even anywhere you are seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, each and every place, the three things, visual object, eye sensitivity and the consciousness has to come. Up to that point, no defilement. moment you cognize, no defilement. Recognition, fixing the notion, fixing a label, fixing this thing, still no problem, but if you know it is just a label. But if you are going to confirm it, then onward only this arrogant nature, the self-egotistic comes through, and you have to let it happen, but to understand the mechanism. More and more you understand this self-nature or non-self character, more and more you understand, you become very humble. You will say, yes, this is what I see, but I am not sure. I am ready to see it again, whether to see the same thing happen. And I am happy to listen your version. That is how the diplomacy, the culture, the gentleness is arising. Otherwise, the moment you assume as a self, you become very arrogant. So then onward, your morality is in danger, your concentration is in danger, the wide view, your vision is in danger. So therefore, to understand that, you have to practice first, in the most of the people, the mindfulness in sitting meditation, but there it is not so giving much of benefits, unless otherwise you bring that very mindfulness into the walking meditation, this very mindfulness into the day-to-day activities, then only you can understand whether you are really making use this the mental factor called mindfulness. So many moralists, they say, you must, throughout the life, you must live in the forest. Throughout the life, you must never look at the bad things. Throughout the life, you must never hear bad things, because things carry defilements. Bad things carry defilement, bad sounds carry the defilements, so therefore you must not expose yourself. The Buddha says that is not the way he is telling. At the beginning, as far as you are assuming, as far as you are training, as far as you are seasoning, keep it in the forest, under a tree, or in a solitude place. Once the mindfulness come into being, once it has become hard and fast, then you have to let the sounds happen, thoughts happen, pain happen, and see how the main object is dealing with the distraction, how the function of the mindfulness. Put it into the walking meditation also, and see amidst of all the kind of distraction, the continuity of the mindfulness. And see while you are doing day-to-day activities, how do you maintain the stream of mindfulness. And even if you are in the multitasking, this is the task you have to do. So therefore, more and more you practice, you are again becoming a commoner. At the beginning only you have to have these conducive conditions or the safe places. Later you have to put into the normal life and apply it. That is how the Buddha says that real restraining of your faculties come in not only in the forest, not only under the tree. When it is growing, your adaptability to the situation is increasing. And more you let the thing happen in the natural way, you will understand defilements are not in seen objects. Defilements are not in the hearing objects. Defilements are not in outside. It is your disciplined mind. You know how to understand defilement and how the defiling process is taking place. And when and where the mindfulness becoming the forerunner, you understand from this point onward I am vulnerable. So better to be silent, better to be slow, better to be mindful, and ultimately thing will happen, but no defilement takes place. Exactly the other person nearby you do not know mindfulness, he may get engaged, he may get committed into that, and full of defilement can take place. So that very thing later you can compare with your past and the present and the future. More and more you develop mindfulness, more and more you develop this neutral observation and accumulation of information, you will understand more and more you are protected. This is what the protection, what the Buddha mentioned, rather than rushing with the lack of information, and that is what the best way of teaching management technique. If you are to run an organization, if you are to lead something, don't rush for decision. If someone come and say something happened, you have to decide. You are a slave. You are not the master. You have to kick him and say, okay, thing happened, you get out. I will decide. I will decide as I am when I am happy. So if you are a bad manager, what you are going to do is immediately thing happen, you get committed with the least amount of information. But if you have to have your discretion to continue again and again, observation go on. Situation is very critical. Situation is demanding, but you must be very composed. You must understand lack of information, so you have to keep on accumulating information, and that decision you are going to take with full of information is lasting, is durable, and it is protecting you. So therefore, more and more you practice, you understand your life organization, that the grammar of the life, or the backbone of your spiritual journey is slowly increasing. That is highly related with how much you get committed, how much you volitionally get involved, how much your willful action happens. That is the ultimatum the Buddha reduced into. He says when and where the mind is, so to say, free of transgressional kind of defilements, obsessional kind of defilements, and when you are entertaining that space, the emptiness, you can see still the mind is proliferating. It is fabricating. It with so much of intention. It is with so much of projection. It is with so much of creativity. It is with so much of the craftsman. And if you are to observe and see from where does the fabrication happens, that is what the karmic forces and volitional momentum it happens. If you are let them come out but not to react, that is what you call catharsis. Your whole defilements will come, but you are not reacting to it, let them surface. When you are surfacing, catharsis happens, your whole mental diseases, psychological wounds, everything surface. They are not so beautiful, but you can understand these are the accumulation happened. If you are to die, this is the dowry, this is the asset you have, you carry it from this life to the other life. But let them happen, let them get out and observe it. The Buddha says, whatever the volitional activity arising, whatever the future planning arising, whatever the perversion happens, if you get committed, you disturb the process. Instead, don't validate these suggestions. Don't validate this prolific thinking. Don't validate this perversion. But if they are not confronted, you are missing the bus. You have to let them confront. You have to let them come, and then behave like a eyed. Even though you are an eyed person, behave like a blind. Even if you are like a person with the very ears intact, behave like a dumb. Behave like a deaf. And even if you can talk and share with others, behave like a dumb. Even you can feel proliferously and very in an amplified way, just behave like a paralyzed person. Let the drama take place, let the phenomena take place, then only you can understand. If you are so calm, if you are so guarded with the restrainment of the morality and the concentration, still these volitional activities are happening. But if you imagine if you are agitated with the transgressional defilements, if you are agitated with the obsessional defilement, what kind of an entanglement, what kind of a fabrication, what kind of a commitment you are going to happen. So therefore, when and where you are unmindful, when and where situation is not under control, you are selecting highest defilement as your first option. You are always selecting the highest bunch of defilements. This is the way it is programmed. That is why the Buddha says, if you are compassionate on yourself, if you have any kind of well-being towards yourself, just see the mechanism. Don't try to stop it 100% at a time. Never. It's in such a momentum. Slowly understand you are the person responsible for all the mishaps happen. And the very simple fact is, you can bear it up. You can put up it. Don't cry with other people. Don't think you are a miserable person. Don't think you are an unfortunate person. The Buddha says, when and where you see how the defilements coming out, your immunity, your resistance, your holding capacity is equally increasing. So therefore you have to face it. As and when it happens, to face it without getting panic, without getting depressed, without getting mentally imbalanced, you must have the notion of impermanence, the notion of non-self character. Even a slight amount is enough you to try it with. When and where you see under your very nose in a vivid way, your self notion will be disproved, non-self notion will slowly come into being. Your permanent notion will be slowly disproved, and now the impermanent notion will slowly come in. And that graduation, the increase, the Buddha says, never you can gauge. It is happening in such a slow way, but there is a kind of a sixth sense telling that I am penetrating into new thing. I can't interpret it, I can't comprehend it, but it is happening. The Buddha says, whenever you are using a knife or axe, again and again you have to rub it against the whetstone in order to keep it sharp. So when a carpenter is using a axe, the Buddha says, by looking at the axe, the handle, if it is well polished, that indicates it is being well used. And if it is sharp, it indicates it's nicely rubbed against the whetstone. But each time you rub against the whetstone, you don't know how much wear and tear is happening to the blade. It's not necessary. But more and more you use it, slowly, blade will be worn out, go out, and you see after a long time, due to this rubbing, due to the sharpness, the wear and tear is taking place. The sharpness, the polished nature of the handle is obvious. And the Buddha says, after long usage, once the blade is finished, he is not necessarily consulting a specialist to throw that away. It's no more use. So usage means wear and tear. Usage means rubbing against the whetstone. Otherwise, if you are keeping inside the safe, it hardly you can call it as an axe. Axe is used only when it is in function. Likewise, when you are practicing, defilements are in the process of wear and tear. But the mindfulness is not going to judge how much I improved today, how much I percentage-wise improving, but there's a kind of a gradual process. So therefore, the Buddha says, don't be judgmental on that. Believe it as far as you are confronting this kind of a defilement, this kind of a mishap, this kind of a frustration. Confront it. This frustration itself is impermanent. This frustration itself is non-self. The unbearable pain, excruciating pain itself is impermanent. Itself is non-self. But in order to get the other's attention, we claim, we call, this my pain is excruciating, it is killing, and it's unbearable life. Never. That is also impermanent. That's also non-self. So you learn with the in-breath and out-breath. Ultimately that will apply to the each sound, each pain, each thought, they comes to go. You are the person fixing with the permanent notion. You are the person fixing with the self-characteristic and then make stories. They fabrications. So whenever you see, each and every one of us must be gifted with the Nobel Prize for this such a fabrication. We are first-class novelists. Unlucky enough, we don't have enough Nobel Prizes. And one or two fool get nominated for the Nobel Prize. That fool lead all of us unmindful. We call bestseller books. And each of us are great thinkers. Only the thing is the correct perspective. Look at it from the correct way and you understand two people, no difference. Each and every one of us have exactly the same capacity, exactly the same potential, exactly the same possibilities, but our liking and dislikings, personality traits and habits make us stereotype, fixed us with blinkers, so we can't see, so we confine to that kind of a prison or the cleavage, and that is what our personality comes to be. So observe it when and where it is happening, but with the broad perspective, namely with the impermanent notion, with the non-self notion, then you can see each and every moment, each and every event is the greatest teledrama, so realistic, nothing to pay, everything happen in a well-balanced. So therefore morning to evening you are observing a teledrama, you are observing a world classics, because you are a very good actor. Each and every one. We are so realistic in acting the way our rut is suggesting. So when and where the mindfulness happens, that stark open, ultimately you fall down to the state of a human. That is the place you become with full of possibilities, full of potential, and you understand each and every one is like that, but they are being limited, they are being cornered, fixed blinkers because of their permanent notion, permanent perception, and the perception to the self-characteristics. So Buddha says they are imprisonment, rigorous imprisonment. If you wish to get out of that, understand the weak points in your prison. Dig a hole and quit yourself. Instead, what we are doing is we are whitewashing our prison. We are brushing each and every piece of brass, telling that we are living in a big house. Our prison is our pride. And that is the way, what you call the commoner's life. That's the way it is, the Putujana's life. But the wise person, he is never become proud about the big imprison or the prison. So that is the way the Buddha says, the way out is, first thing is, get the notion of impermanence. The second thing is the notion of non-self character. It is hardly, when you are analyzing in this way, hardly have any kind of spiritual value. No mistakes. This is so rational. Of course, the end result is very cultured, very gentle, very social, and you never harm the society, values of the society, nature, climate, nothing, and not harming your physical health and the bodily health. And that is the message the Buddha is passing to Girimananda. As far as your thinking, the fabrications are non-self, you are healing it in each and every moment. When and where it is assuming self-character, you are in the imprison and your bodily and mental health deteriorate. So therefore, those who concern about one's own well-being, take this seriously and put into practice, and without long, may they experience the due results. With that wish, I would like to sum up the today's talk. Thank you very much for listening.